All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today. We are covering part 2 of mercy giving and discussing your role in the body. It looks like most people in here have been in here before, so we'll kind of go through the introductory part a little faster than normal to try to save more time for discussion at the end, which I know is important and I know that everyone likes and always contributes to, which is a good thing. Main point here is I think I said this last week, there are a lot of ways that you could go about learning from this class, I would hope. But at some point we have to pick if you try to do everything, you'll end up doing nothing. So kind of the main point is how do we stir up action in the body and get people using their gifts. One way I said last week that we could learn from this is even if mercy giving, for instance, is not your gift because it's not mine, there are things I can absolutely learn from our discussion and from the things that we're going through to be better at that, though that might not be the point of the class. So I think that we can all learn more about these gifts and learn how to better apply them in our lives and use them practically. But again, the point is to try to stir up action in the body. This is talking about the combination of God-given talent and passion. So we're not talking about speaking in tongues or gifts of knowledge or miraculous gifts like that. We're looking at this through the self-assessment lens, through how do we encourage and help others to be more effective as a lens, and then also the church body as a whole. And then, as always, these gifts need to be used in love and unity. I think I've said with encouragement and mercy giving as well, it's hard to imagine this not being used in love. But I'm certain that there are times where maybe someone could be doing something to try to get something else out of it or to do it for show or something like that. But I would say that no matter what your gift is, use it in love and use it in unity. Otherwise, it's not as effective. We also have talked about the body as a whole, and when we looked at Romans chapter 12 and 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and we found that all of us have gifts and all of us are expected to use them. Again, we should use our gifts in love. We should be humble in our gift, but we should also not be afraid to use our gift. Again, if you're not sure what your gift is, a good place to start is by taking the test on findmyspiritualgift.com. Again, it's just a starting point. It'll rank them all with what you're most likely to be, your top 3, and then what you probably are not. And I've said before, when I took that, teaching was my top 1 and mercy giving was my bottom 1. So I'm learning a lot in this discussion that we're going through to be better at bringing those numbers that I may have assigned to them closer together. Again, just real quick, as this is what we discussed last week. So this comes from the list in Romans chapter 12. So he who shows mercy with cheerfulness, or the one who shows mercy with cheerfulness. It's about 17% of people. It means, the Greek word means one who shows compassion. So in English, mercy means compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. And then compassion means sympathetic pity and the concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. But as we discussed last week, and we're going to say here in just a second, mercy giving is much more than that. It's more than just feeling that sympathy and compassion for others, although that certainly is an important component. It's then being compelled to alleviate the things that those people are going through, and so to alleviate pain and suffering. Mercy givers are also not just Hans has a pointer. Mercy givers are the most forgiving of all the gifts, generally speaking, which, as we're going to see, is, I always say your greatest, oh man, just had to one-up me. So I always say your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. So if your greatest strength is being really forgiving, your greatest weakness is that you are really forgiving. So we'll discuss that in just a little bit, but they are in their gift kind of without judgment, forgiveness, and with forgiveness, spirit of gentleness and cheerfulness. Again, the top section, Hans and I are just going to battle it out over here. Yeah, it's just way better for you. So, as we just discussed, all of us can learn how to be better at using this. All of us can learn how to be better at being merciful to others, but that's not the point of the discussion today. It's more like people who are mercy givers, how do you get better at using your gift? How can we encourage you? And then we will open it up for the congregation as a whole after that. So it's not just talking to someone or being...
People will get annoyed if I do it too much.
Okay. So this is just taking it away from you. Okay.
Use it.
Okay. It's not just talking to people and sitting with them in their pain and suffering. It's taking practical action steps to help alleviate the pain and suffering. So we'll go through some examples of that in just a little bit. I think this is the part that I was saying that maybe could be a hang-up for a lot of people. We want to be merciful. We want to help people who are in pain and suffering. But then oftentimes it's hard to take the patience and the effort that is required to be with someone who is going through a difficult time and helping to alleviate that suffering. So it takes a lot of time, effort, and patience, but those with this gift are not afraid of that, and they welcome that aspect of it. And so then finally, there is some overlap with encouragement and service. I know that the difference in these is motivation. So encouragers, their motivation is to instill courage in others. So, hey, you're doing a good job of this, continue doing that. Or I think you could do well in this area. Why don't we get started in this area? Whereas service is more task-oriented, so seeing a need, filling the need, and moving on, not as much having that emotional connection. But mercy givers are focused on the emotional and physical well-being of another person. So even though they might provide service to that person by doing a task or something like that, the point is their physical and emotional well-being, not necessarily that there's a task that needs filled or that they need encouraged to continue in something, although those things can happen simultaneously. And then we discussed several passages. First of all, in Luke 6:36, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. And then Psalm 103:13 says, just as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. So kind of a similar concept where I was trying to come up with a better analogy than this. It's not the best, but like how the moon reflects the light of the sun onto the earth. It's not like the best bit. We should be moons or something like that. It could be kind of weird. But, just as the moon reflects light from the sun onto the earth, we are to reflect God's light to others, whether that is teaching or it's encouragement or it's mercy giving. So God has the ultimate compassion on his people and the ultimate compassion on us. And so then we need to be reflecting that onto others, and mercy givers understand that and do that better than others. Jesus is a great example of a mercy giver. Brian has a comment to make.
Yeah, just actually on the bottom of that last slide where you were talking about kind of intersections between mercy givers and other things. What do you see mercy givers or the act of giving mercy ever kind of intersecting with advocacy?
Yeah.
Well, you're going out being an advocate for the person to whom you're.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, I didn't have that on one of the ideas for action. I kind of read it as one, as like a thing that's probably a good idea to include. But yeah, finding people, who. I guess what direction are you going? Like people who aren't able to advocate for themselves, or people who are just are being overlooked and you advocate for them on their behalf?
Yeah, people who don't feel empowered to speak out for themselves, that you go ahead and speak out for them and
Gotcha.
ensure that their needs are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I'd agree with that. So there's an example in Mark 10 of someone who is blind and asking and cries out to Jesus and says, Father, have mercy on me. Or, what does he say? Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus not only sees this person who's going through pain and suffering, doesn't just acknowledge that they're going through pain and suffering, he alleviates their pain and suffering. Obviously, Jesus was better equipped to be able to alleviate pain and suffering than we are, but just another example of how he is the great mercy giver that is our example. Tabitha, who's also called Dorcas, showed mercy by providing clothing to widows. So again, it's not just sitting with someone in their suffering, it's being practical and providing solutions for them. So an example of that could be providing clothing to people who need it. Another example could be providing to those who are suffering physically. So in this case, the Philippian jailer helps to bandage wounds and stuff like that of Paul and Silas. And also feeds them while they are ministering to him spiritually. And then the great example of the Samaritan who is the Samaritan who's on the road. So the person who gets beat up by robbers or whatever the case is, and they're just on the road. And we often take it from the perspective of who is my neighbor, and it's the Pharisee and the priests go by and they don't do anything with him, but it's the Samaritan who, as Hans pointed out last week, is, for lack of a better term, a half-breed that did not get along well with the Jews, and he is the person who attends to him. But the point of this is more like, how does he, so not only does he see that there's someone who is in pain and suffering on the road, but then does something about it. So provides transportation by putting this person on his animal, takes him to an inn, bandages this person's wounds, feeds them, provides shelter for them, tells the innkeeper whatever else is needed to help this person, I'll contribute my financial resources towards that. So again, just a great example of what it really means to be a mercy giver, even though, yes, it is a parable. So this is where we left off and where we're picking up today. These next two passages are just further on in Romans and in Ephesians. So this is where we get the list that we're going from today, the list of gifts. And so I think it's important then, if you were to just ask me, like, how do you act as a Christian? Probably the first place I would go is Romans chapter 12, maybe the book of James. There's probably others that are great as well. But in Romans chapter 12, it says to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. So again, this is later on in just talking about spiritual giftedness, and Paul is describing what a Christian should be. So it's someone who is present. So not only in times of anguish or sorrow, being willing to sit with that person in their suffering, but also when something good happens, to rejoice with them in the good times that they're having. Mike.
Relative to the members of the body, the elders broke up families amongst groups, and I had a call from a member of my group yesterday. I won't mention any names, so I don't have to embarrass anybody, but came up with a real good suggestion, which I'll bring up to the elders meeting tomorrow night. We have a number of people that are suffering from various different maladies and spending a lot of time in hospitals and treatments and that type of thing. And as you know, with the wars going on, money is getting tight. And there is a number of things that money could be utilized for, like hotel rooms during that stay and meals and that type of thing for extended stays. And they brought up a suggestion that possibly we could do some benevolence through gift cards or that type of thing. So I'll also bring this up during announcements if Hans reminds me. But we do have the ability to help support the members of our body. And this is one of the ways that we can do that is and show our mercy to members of the body.
Yeah, so if you're not being present with what's going on, you're overlooking those types of opportunities, right? Ephesians 4:32, be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ has forgiven you. So once again, we've been saying that those with this gift kind of maybe more naturally have a better understanding of the depth of God's forgiveness and his compassion for us, and they are the most willing then to provide that compassion and that forgiveness onto others. Okay, so some signs of maturity and immaturity in the mercy giver. So signs of maturity, they have a positive attitude, so they are forgiving in relationships, they're content in character, and they're gentle in spirit. So mercy givers tend to be the most gentle souls who would never want to hurt or to bring sorrow on another person. As I've been saying, they're the most forgiving of all the gifts, and they really just understand that gift, the gift of forgiveness that God, through Jesus, has provided to us. They're also really good at not judging and letting go of the faults of others. So again, that contributes to this positive attitude where they're meeting with someone who's going through a tough time. It might have been a time that they got themselves into, and they're not providing judgment. Instead, having a positive attitude and helping them to get out of that situation, again, instead of judging them for being in that situation in the first place. Next, they have a heart for others, so they're the magnets for the wounded, listeners for the neglected, and faithful in relationships. So mercy givers tend to be magnets that draw hurting people to the church to then shelter them from the cruel world that we have going on around us, which Mike was just alluding to. They're great listeners, and they're incredibly faithful and present to everyone else that has overlooked or forgotten them. I think I said last week a really good example of this is people who are in a nursing home situation that don't have a lot of visitors. Oftentimes, especially if they're older, they don't have family members living or in the area, so they're just oftentimes by themselves. And so a person who's high in mercy giving will be faithful in that relationship, which just means they don't just stop by occasionally when they're in the area, although those are good things to do, but they are committed to consistently being there for that person and providing and establishing a relationship with them so that they don't feel as lonely and they have someone with them when no one else is. And then they're also attentive. So they reach out to the poor, they reach out to the ill, and they reach out to the aged. A common phrase mercy givers hear is, "I don't know where you find these people." And that's because they attract the downtrodden of society. So they see those who are in pain and overlooked, and maybe that's part of the gift. I don't know. Again, this is low for me. So not only do they're better at just seeing people who are going through difficult situations that other people just might not straight up be seeing. But then again, they then take that next step to following through and to helping alleviate that suffering. But it starts with being attentive. And as we just discussed, it starts with being present with where you are at in the congregation and with other people. Some signs of immaturity. They can be indecisive, so they can be inconsistent in reactions, neglectful in corrections, and the doormat in relationships. So as we just talked about, with encouragers, mercy givers can have a tendency to be more non-confrontational, which means providing discipline or correction would tend to not occur as much with the mercy giver as it might with other gifts. And they continue to, so back up just a second. As I just said, oftentimes I'm finding your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. So if you're a really forgiving person, that's oftentimes a really good thing. But it can be a bad thing if you're too forgiving of someone who time and time again is refusing to change. And the immature mercy giver thinks, well, but this next time it will be different, even though they have shown that it won't be. So again, every situation is different, but they can oftentimes be the doormat to someone who doesn't want to change and keeps apologizing and promising to be different. They are emotional, so they can be prone to depression, prone to sorrow, and prone to oversensitivity. So I can't imagine what it would be like to constantly internalize the sufferings and pain of other people and how that would start to affect you over time. And I'm sure that it would, if you're immature in this gift, you would be more sorrowful. You would be more likely to be prone to depression because you're just internalizing all the pain and suffering that's going on. But they can also be overly sensitive to someone trying to correct them, whether they are doing, hopefully, that person is doing that correction in love, right, and trying to do it nicely to that person. But in general, those who have the gift of mercy don't take that very well. Mike?
I'd say in immaturity, you could also be overly insensitive.
What do you mean by that?
It's difficult a lot of times to put yourself in other people's shoes. And some people refuse to do that or even think about that. So if you're not sensitive to needs and attentive to those needs, that's where the insensitivity
Gotcha.
comes in.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then lastly, they can lack perspective. So they tend to be uninformed, disorganized, and undisciplined. So they can overlook obvious warning signs that it might be time to end a relationship. They don't take a step back and look at the big picture, and instead they can fall into a trap of subjectivity and inconsistent logic in providing mercy instead of moving on or changing their approach. So we have still, I guess, potty training 3-year-old right now. And so something that Addie and I found that, of course, we started off trying to potty train him the same way that we did with Lily, which worked really well, and every kid is different, right? And so we had to change our method of motivation for Wesley multiple times until we found the one that worked. And so in that same way, I think all of us need to be willing to change our approach when we're dealing with other people instead of always trying to do this, trying to hammer that round peg into that square hole, or vice versa.
Yeah, and one other thing kind of going along with that is that you need, as somebody who's doing this, you need to be able to triage. Mm-hmm. Where, as much as every one of us, I think, would love to have the ability to give the infinite mercy and grace that Christ gives us, we're human, and there's a bottom to the bucket somewhere. Mm-hmm. So part of the maturity that you have to show is, okay, what can I do for who, and how best are my resources utilized?
Yeah, that's really, I don't know why I was going for Hans's point other than just to use it, but that's a really good point that, and oftentimes that line between maturity and immaturity is difficult to find, and there's a reason why there's maturity in the gift and not in finding, yeah, those lines.
I just want to be sure that we've got our definitions right. You're talking about a person who has the gift of mercy but is immature with it.
Yes, yep,
Versus the rest of us.
Correct.
Who may simply have all these traits as well.
yes, yeah. Some of us don't naturally have that one, but yes.
Fred just raised the bar.
Yeah. Get my belt started.
So when I think of mercy, I think of someone did you wrong and you show compassion and kindness towards them. But I feel like the way we are using it is we have power over them, and it's not that they necessarily did us wrong, because like, what has a poor person done to me, right? What has a poor person done in this church? But we can still show them benevolence, like Mike said earlier, and give them food and provide clothes for them. So I think there's a difference between mercy and kindness, essentially. And I think it's important to know that difference.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I didn't really, emphasize the power dynamic that you're talking about. It definitely, at least if you're using the English definition of what mercy is, it's not doing something wrong to someone who deserves it. So like you're saying, then taking that and applying it then to a situation where you have more power over someone, using that power for good instead of for evil. Monty has a comment.
Thank you. Mercy can also entail forgiveness. And I think it does, and I think we're taught that. Just for example, when Jesus is eating with one of the Pharisees, the woman comes in and she kneels at his feet and she cries and washes his feet with her tears and then wipes them away. And the guy that hosts the party, he's all incensed about this, And basically what Jesus is winding up teaching him is the person that's forgiven much loves much. The person that's forgiven little loves little. When we show that mercy and forgiveness, and trust me, every hour of every day, we are all faced with quick little judgments in our mind about what this person did, what that person did. And I don't think our mind always goes directly to, let me show mercy. For example, how many in here know that Tiger Woods got a DUI yesterday when he rolled over his vehicle? Well, this isn't the first one for him, is it? And I was just reading comments on this post about it, and it was about half and half. Half of them were like, oh, these rich people think they can get away with anything, and blah, blah, blah. And the other half were, the guy has a problem and it needs to be treated. And so really, when it comes down to the individual Christian and us being mature in our mercy, we need to also look at our judgments, and how do we pass judgments on every little, the life things that happen every little day, whether it's something, it's easy for us to show mercy to ourselves, right? No. I think it is.
It can be.
I think in the generality of it, it is. Maybe we're not all like you.
Every person is different. Weird.
Yeah. But I think it winds up being that, we have to look at how we demonstrate that mercy to others in forgiveness.
So is that how you work in golf? Okay. Now, I'm trying to learn how you guys do this.
Wait till he starts talking about Jordan Spieth.
So, immaturity, unfortunately, does have a negative connotation. So what I would state is that when you look at lack of perspective, generally that means lack of experience. And I know I've seen people from having no experience in sin and forgiveness, and that same person, maybe not even years later, all of a sudden, God turns on that switch, and that person, I've seen them have the maturity, if you will, because they have finally got the perspective. The difficulty in any discussion that you may have is that person's perspective are personal. And the maturity would come in for them to understand that, first of all, but then not beat themselves up for not having the same bad experiences, so that therefore they can't understand. They're not supposed to understand every sin. They are just there to love the person, though they do not understand what occurred. And so I kind of mince all this together because you're saying a mature person, I agree with you about gives mercy to themselves, but man, I work at that. And I consider myself to be a person who's approachable, who's been have no problem getting dirty, and talking to people about how I was consistently saved and then how I came back. But I am very hard for me to give mercy to myself.
Yeah, and like I'm saying, every person. So like Monty's saying, so if someone cuts you off in traffic, they're an idiot who doesn't know how to drive, right? But if you cut someone off in traffic, well, I'm a lot better driver than that. That wasn't my intent. So I guess might be part of where Monty was coming at there. But yeah, Hans covered a lot of ground there that's really good, that Kevin is going to build upon.
In Scott City, we had at the hospital a fund for people who could not afford meds. And they would call and we'd fill out a voucher for them to take to the pharmacy. And when you talk about judgment and mercy, some of those people we would see as they came in putting out their cigarettes and buying beer at the grocery store. And I found myself being very judgmental about that. But then I tried to remind myself that is part of their problem. It's addiction, and I would have liked to have seen, and maybe it was being handled, trying to take care of those addictions. But we gave out a lot of funds to those people, and I was very judgmental at times about that. But I tried to remind myself that they had that problem and had to deal with it.
Yes, being forgiving is not the easiest thing.
My turn?
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying, because I think the opposite of mercy is condemnation. When we condemn somebody else, we take into consideration, well, they have all these opportunities, but then what's wrong? And that's generalities, and we're talking about acts of mercy. I have a hand up over here for, just want to make sure you see that. I'm showing mercy. It's interesting to me that as both in Corinthians and here, these are gifts. So somebody's going to have the exponential ability given by the Spirit of God to give mercy beyond the general population in our church family. In the same way that somebody else has, we're all, in a sense, called to a prophetic role, but some are given the extra by the Spirit to do works of prophecy in that sense. So this is the instruction that's given along with it. It's not, you have this gift, use it this way. You have this gift, use it this way. So the prophecy, in proportion to your faith, service, in serving, and which is interesting. Do your service in serving.
Do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Do it really serving. You have a gift of service. Now serve. Keep on serving. The one who teaches in his teaching, but then he gives exhortation and exhortation. These are repetitive, it seems. But then you get these in generosity. Rather, the one who contributes, be generous. Don't just contribute a little bit. You have a gift of generosity, or rather of contribution. Contribute generously. Lead with zeal. Just don't get in front and be passionate about it. And this last one gets me. In your mercy, with cheerfulness. And I'm just interested to know, the gifts that the Spirit of God gives now are given with instruction by the apostle to say, if you're going to use it this way. Like the ones who were speaking in tongues, they were out of control. So he gave them directions. This is how you'd use your gift in the assembly. This is how you use your gift, prophets, in the assembly. And it gives them instructions on how to use the gift, because the gift comes without a manual. So what's up with, when you do an act of mercy, do it cheerfully? What do you think is involved in that? Why would he say, do it cheerfully? Is that because you become more mature in your use of the gift? Or, because, again, I wrestle with a gift of the Spirit in contrast with something that is a natural talent that you've developed over your life. One is exponentially, supernaturally given by the Spirit of God to you. That's beyond what you would have in your background. And the other is, I don't know, I grew up in a very merciful family, and I just am more merciful. Or a decision. I've made a personal decision. If I have a choice between approaching somebody with legalism and condemnation, or grace and mercy, and I'm going to make a mistake somewhere, I'll make a mistake on the side of grace instead of the side of condemning. Because I think Jesus is a little upset with his people being condemning. Let him do that. We give grace.
Yeah, there's a lot of directions to go with that. My off the top of the head, which I'm a processor, so I got to think through these things. I do wonder if part of why, thanks Hans for the laser, I would say maybe the tendency of the mercy giver is to get caught up in the emotions of it and to not be positive. And so then that's the encouragement then from Paul to say, hey, while you're going through all these difficult times and sitting with these people in these difficult situations, do so with a positive attitude, because that's going to be more helpful. I don't know. Again, just off the top of my head, I don't know.
With the type of job I have, I deal with the public quite a bit. And so I have a lot of opportunities to either give mercy or to not give mercy. And I find that I start feeling a little better if somebody gets on my bus and says, oh, I just, I tried to do this and it couldn't get it to work. Or I'm like, go ahead, get on the bus, because I know you got to get to wherever you're going. Or if I'm the last bus of the day and I see somebody running up, I'm not just going to take off. I'll give them that chance, because I know otherwise they're out in the cold and they're going to be walking or whatever. So I get that opportunity, and it makes me feel a little better. And doing it out of cheerfulness, the other person will see that, and hopefully it might cheer them up, knowing that, hey, I was running late, or I was in kind of a bad situation, and somebody did something for me, and they were glad about it. And that might just give them a little something more to maybe even pay it forward to somebody else.
Yeah. All right, Kathy.
Well, on your list up there, maturity and immaturity, I feel like you have to be emotional to show your maturity.
Yeah.
Because you can't be like Chicken Little and not know what to do. But the maturity helps you make the right decisions and do things. And you have to have compassion and sorrow. I mean, sorrowful with other people, and that's emotional.
Yes.
That's an emotional.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I probably should have said they are overly emotional in their immaturity. As I said before, Doug's lowest is mercy giving. I think that kind of comes out in the chapter. Mine is as well. So if people have emotions, they're overly emotional. That's a joke, by the way.
I think I think part of the perspective of this too is that as Christians, none of us don't want to be merciful.
Correct.
None of us
Correct.
don't want to be
Yes.
kindness. But the truth of the matter is I might be hard pressed to find the person that has mercy as a gift, because that's like a whole nother level of those on the immaturity side of it. There, if somebody that's got a drug problem comes to me, I'm going to be pretty indecisive how to help them, emotionally disconnected, and lack perspective of that. And that's just the reality of something along those lines. Whereas something else comes along, yeah, I can show mercy to them. I can show kindness. I can help them as a Christian with that kind of stuff. But I don't think that that's, as I've told you before, I don't know what my God-given talent is outside of just existing. Yeah, I think as we look at this too deeply, don't get wrapped up in the thought that mercy isn't your thing. Because like you said, it's 17% of us. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like there's one in this congregation, maybe.
There might be a couple. No, that's a really good point. Here, just a second, Fred. That's a really good point that
Thanks
I'm
for being merciful.
hoping to get to in a minute is part of using your gift, whatever your gift is to open up those pathways for others. Because I would agree, all of us want to be merciful, all of us want to be kind, but some of us are not as naturally inclined to do it and might need a easier runway to get started on that.
And I wanted to, actually, Dwayne already said what I was basically going to say, but everybody's been given examples of when they've shown mercy, but that is different than the gift. And I think if we can all put that in perspective, we should all be mercy givers, even though it's not our gift.
Yes,
Even though
agreed.
it's not something we can just spontaneously do without first condemning somebody because they rolled their car or whatever. You know?
Yes.
But I think that's really, really important for
Agreed.
us to
Agreed.
recognize that.
That's the direction we're trying to go with it. That's not always super easy because there's many ways we can go with it. Did you have something, Hans?
Sorry.
Monty's advocating for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. There are people with a gift. I'm going to say I think I have the gift for mercy, okay? But that's not me being pompous. That's me saying that I am being a more of a coming back to Christ taught me a lot. And he allowed me to stay out in the muck and mire and squalor, whatever you want to say, long enough to teach me to have compassion. And yet, when I was a kid, I was a really nice guy. I was near perfect. My wife even named her first child, though we were not together, and I was 11, after me, Christian. That's not Hans, but she's a girl. But my point is this, is that it is a gift when you go to that level, when you can pull a heroin needle out of a guy's arm who's been hitting on you all night when you're a bartender in the East Village. And I was lost at that time, but I felt compassion that I didn't want this guy to die. And so it is a gift, but when you have that level, it's hard. And you've probably been given the gift of mercy by God and through Christ to be able to have that gift because of what you've been through. And so many times when I talk to people, I'm even careful. I have mercy on making sure I don't put, and yet some I have, put in those visual sins so they will understand how much I've been forgiven. And yet, in some cases, it scars them. So, all I'm going with this is it is a gift. We all need to give it, especially when you've got people who get DUIs. I would say somebody needs to preach Jesus to him, maybe in a golf game, I don't know. But at the same time, it is a gift when you use it at whatever level. But those who you can see are doing what would seem very difficult and dirty, they have been given a very special gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something you hit on earlier, I thought was a really good point, is the experience required. So experience is required to develop that line between immaturity and maturity. And yeah, there's 15 different ways I want to go with that I'm definitely not a psychologist, but how does God then grant that gift to, does he grant it through a bad experience when you're younger? And so then you put yourself in situations that require forgiveness, so now you are much better at providing that forgiveness to others? I don't know.
Because you need to hear this. So if you didn't have, say, a two-parent, well, let's say mother, father, upraising, something like that, you're already going to be getting to a level of experience that a lot of people, thank goodness, don't have. And yet, many of us do. So I would say that things were difficult enough, and through seeing my aunt and my mother persevere and keep us going to church, keep us in the congregation, doing those potlucks. That's what they're called, by the way. Being around
Take his
these
microphone away.
people, it helped because when I finally did my own sinning and the realization of the self-destructive, and it was addictive, whether you're on a drug or not, that is when I was able to be shown and then saved, I believe, to be able to have compassion for those. So yes, it starts early. I mean, early for those of us who just want everything to be okay.
Yeah.
And so there are others, I don't want to say there are several people who have that terrible upbringing, but were raised in the church and then are able to have that perspective after they have their own sins forgiven.
I think going back to Kevin's comment relative to, I think it was 1 Corinthians he was referring to, Kevin. It's speaking more about attitude and frame of mind in the administration of maturity. And, he used the word condemnation. I'm not sure I agree with that. There are times that we do have to show tough love. And that's part of the maturity. What's scripture to be used for? 1 Timothy 3:16, for training, for correction, for reproof. We need to always go back to the word in the application of our gift of mercy. So there are times, Colleen brought up, it's easy to get into a condition where you make quick judgments if you don't know the entire story of those personnel. So you really need to step back and check your frame of mind, which she indicated that she had done, but and think about exactly, the disease of addiction. I guess that's one of the correct ways of saying it today. Is something that is very difficult to give up. And people oftentimes will give up cigarettes, alcohol, whatever. They can go back many times before they finally accomplish getting away from that addiction. But it takes a long time to get through that. So.
Yep. Colleen.
Well, I was getting ready to say about what he was talking about. It's strange, but my sister had a nephew that my son's age, that my sister gave him everything, anything he ever wanted. And she had an older son that did not get that privilege. I don't know why, but to the point that to keep his, pay for his cars and things, he had a full ride to Washburn University, had a wonderful car, but to pay for it, he started selling meth. Then he started using meth and selling other drugs. And finally, one of his best friends found him on the road out on Interstate. I don't know how on Interstate, because you're not, but that's where he found him. Picked him up, brought him home to Plainville. And they never sent him to true treatment, but brother took him in, then my son took him in, and he was so mean and terrible that my son had to ask him to leave. He went back to his mother. His mother was terrified of her own son. He was just out of control. And she finally had, for her safety and his, and everybody around, kick him out of the house. And he was homeless. And but he got himself together. He got a job finally, and it was one of the hardest things we've ever had to do. My parents were afraid of him, lived 16 miles away. They had never locked their door, but they started. And because of their grandson. And he finally started getting his act together. Because of that, it was a hard thing to do. I don't know that I could do it, but it had to be done. And was that mercy? I think that it was in a hard a hard way, yes, tough love. It was horrible. He did end up dying from a drug overdose, though, but he had his life together for a short time.
All right, well, that was the bell, just real quick. So we've been talking a lot about experience, and the only way to develop that maturity versus immaturity is by putting your gift into action, right? So we're gonna turn this into a 3-week one on mercy giving. Here are the questions for if you would tend to have that gift. So maybe take a look at these, and next time, if you have them, please attend so we can learn from you. So, and then if you want to take the test, there it is again. All right, so class is over for today. Thank you all for your participation.